Great. I think we're live. So hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Rick Adams from Practicalcsm.com. And for me, this is a very special occasion. This is the very first in my series of live podcasts, i.e. broadcasted literally live in front of an invited audience. And I'll now be doing this on a once per month basis. And up until now, I've been recording my podcasts offline, as it were, and then editing them and publishing them maybe a week or so after I've actually had the conversation, but not anymore. So the reason I'm doing this is that what I'm hoping for is a bit of audience interaction and participation that enables more of a two-way conversation between myself and my guests and all of you who are out there watching and listening. That's the ambition, and I guess we'll just have to see how it works out as we move forward. So before I introduce my guest, let me just explain. We're calling the whole series Coffee Bar Conversations with Rick Adams, and the idea is that each month I have a different guest and a different customer success related topic, which I discuss with that guest in an informal setting. And we do have some questions prepared, and obviously both the guest and I know where we want to go within the conversation, but that's just for our guidance, and the actual route we take, the destination we arrive at, might well differ from that which we've planned. So just to show you, if I can, before we start, I just want to show you, if I share my screen, this page here on my website. So hopefully you can see that. So this is, if you just go to practicalcsm.com and choose the free live webinars menu option, you'll find Coffee Bar Conversations Live with Rick Adams. And then what you see here, excuse me, looking over on my other screen. There we go. What you see here is all of the guests. So we had Marek originally, Prithwi, of course, now, Dario, John, and so on coming up, and the ability to register for those. So you can access that information again, practicalcsm.com, free live webinars. You can see that menu option there, and then you can go to choose the Coffee Bar Conversations, and you'll be able to access that. So I just wanted to quickly share that with you before we get started today. Please do, go and have a look, register, and better still, actually, register for the newsletter, and then we'll keep you posted, of course, about all upcoming events, and not just the Coffee Bar Conversations, but everything. Okay, so the format for today's event and for each monthly event in this series is very simple. I'm going to introduce my guest in a moment, and we'll start our conversation on our chosen topic. At the end, we will invite questions from our viewers and listeners, and you are welcome to submit those questions actually at any time you like. Put them in the chat window. Feel free to submit a question whilst you think about it, or wait until the QA session at the end and then submit it, just as you prefer. Also, you will see there's a poll asking you a little bit about your role within customer success management. If you've not already done so, if you feel like it, please just choose the option that relates to you. And I will end that poll shortly, and we'll share the results. Just purely unscientific, and it's just of interest to see who is attending. And now I think it's time to introduce my guest for February. And I'm really excited to have a great guest for my very first live podcast. And in fact, my guest should have been Chitra Madhwacharula, Director of Customer Success for Couchbase. And she and I were going to be talking about building consulting service offerings within customer success orgs. And unfortunately, Chitra got called away to an essential meeting at short notice. And that is a shame, because that was going to be a great discussion that I was very much looking forward to. Now, hopefully we'll be able to reschedule our call with Chitra and have that same conversation another time. But meantime, I reached out to one of my newer friends that I've made in the profession in the last month or so to see if he'd be prepared to step in at the last minute. Unfortunately, he very kindly said yes. And so we're actually very privileged, I think, to grab some time live today out of the schedule of someone who I have no doubt whatever is super, super busy right now. My new guest today is Prithwi Dasgupta, who is the CEO and founder of SmartKarrot, which, if you're not yet aware, is one of the very latest customer success software platforms to hit the market. And it has made a lot of rapid progress in this market in a very short time. Prior to founding SmartKarrot just last year, Prithwi was one of the minds behind a leading financial services software product, which he and his team sold in 2019 for over $250 million. So SmartKarrot is Prithwi's second business venture, and no doubt his ambitions are even higher for SmartKarrot than his already excellent track record. So, hi Prithwi, I realize you must be a very busy person, what with the recent launch and the initial success of SmartKarrot all going on around you. So thank you very, very much indeed for taking the time to join us here today, especially at such short notice.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Rick. Always a pleasure talking to you. I'm happy to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Likewise, very much so. So our topic for conversation today is, I think, a very important one, and perhaps also a very apt topic to be discussing with the CEO of a software platform provider such as yourself, Prithwi, because our topic is the role of data in customer success management. But before we get started, would you be kind enough, please, just to give us a brief understanding of who you are and perhaps just outline your journey to get to where you are today as CEO of SmartKarrot?
Sure, absolutely. Last 20 odd years, I actually started my career in sales, moved on to marketing a little bit, then into product management, back into sales, business development, then, sort of went on to manage a large business unit for my prior organization, as you mentioned. And we were doing, the health tech business unit is what I mentioned. And handled over the last 6-7 years. And it's around 2018 timeframe that we exited out of that business. And in 2019, started this journey with SmartKarrot. So it's been a mix of multiple roles, Rick. I've dabbled in different aspects of running a business, and then eventually now get to run my own. It's different cup of tea altogether. But yeah, enjoying it. And I think a large part of my belief and hence the attraction towards customer success and intelligence-driven customer success is the success I've had myself in being able to grow book of businesses and retaining customers and keeping them happy and satisfied. And I believe it's something which is very fundamental to the way businesses are run. I believe, as you would imagine in a few conversations with you earlier also, that customer success needs more parity with sales and other functions going ahead.
Absolutely.
That's what's driving me with SmartKarrot today.
Great. Okay, thanks for that. And now we can get started proper, I think, for our topic, the role of data in customer success management. But just before we do that, actually, let me just quickly end the poll, and that will just display it for everybody. So quite interesting, actually. We don't have any juniors or intermediates with us. We've got people with 5 or more years of experience in the room. So that's really interesting, helpful for us to know, I think, also in terms of the conversation that we're going to be having, including roughly like a third who would describe themselves as senior CSMs, roughly a sixth who would describe themselves as team leaders, roughly a sixth head of CS, and roughly a third then the remainder saying other, something I haven't thought of, so whatever that might be. So thank you for that. That's just of interest. And as I said, please do talk to us in the chat window, so I can see MD Tohidul Islam is here. Good evening to you as well. And if you want to put your comments in there, we will be picking them up later on. But for now, we will crack on with our conversation. So let's get started talking about the role of data in customer success management. And perhaps the most obvious place to start is to talk about the rise of data within business in general. So why has data become so significant and important, and it's everywhere? What's driving that? What's enabling it? What's all this thing about business data, data-driven research and analysis, data-driven decision-making? And why is this happening now and over the last sort of, say, past 10 to 15 years, would you say?
Yeah, it's a good question to start off the conversation, I think, Rick. And quite a few things come to mind. The first one is data-driven businesses have actually been more successful than non-data-driven businesses over time. So that and people start looking, hey, these guys are doing well. Why? Their best practices are oriented around data. So yeah, let's follow. And that obviously is a significant aspect of driving this. A huge part of this also is whatever we do and touch in operations or business ops, to be more specific, generates a lot of data across different aspects of doing business. So whether it is acquiring a customer, whether it's servicing the customer, whether it's the life cycle of the customer, or as in customer success, the value of the customer and what you showcase, a lot of it is generating a whole lot of data, right? And more data leads to connecting the data to more actions. And once that starts working in an optimized environment, you sort of taste blood and say, hey, I need more of this. So then you now automate more, and you generate even more data in that process. So it's a vicious cycle. But more than anything, I think that first point, people have actually been successful. They have had more profitability being data-driven. They have been more successful in meeting their business objectives, which is why this last decade of evolution into big data and so much of data-driven discussions we have been having and seeing.
So would you say that if your business is data-driven, let's put it that way, then what we're actually saying is that decision making is based upon known facts, and obviously you still got to interpret those facts.
Yeah.
But based nevertheless on known facts rather than assumptions. Is that really what we're talking about here?
Yes and no. I think the fundamental jump into a data-driven ecosystem is because of your belief that it is the fact. However, as we know, data can also be modified and interpreted differently.
Oh, yeah.
So, and data is really universal. So it used to be a competitive advantage for an organization to be data-driven maybe 10 years back. Today, everyone is able to access that same set of data.
That's true.
So what to do with it is more of a competitive differentiator. Really.
But you're quite right. In terms of the technology, it's now just available as tools for any business of any size, even a small business. Whereas, perhaps 15 years ago, you would need to be big enough to, purchase some fairly chunky, data backends from the likes of Oracle or IBM or similar, and have a lot of technical expertise to be driving that. And one of the particular issues that was being overcome at the same time, and this is what I'm talking about, the rise of big data, if anyone's interested here, is what we're talking about here, is at the same time as like the ability to actually store and analyze big data, is the recognition that at the time, all our data was in different formats.
Yeah,
and there was nothing that could actually look at it all in one go. I would say that is something also that has given rise to this ability, is the fact that the technology now allows for it. It allows us to capture data from all areas and all aspects of our business, including, of course, the Internet of Things, and then to assemble that into a single huge database of data, or even disparate databases connected together, and make sense of it all. Yeah. And so the point about data is not the data. The point about data is the ability to use it to make good decisions, and that's not as easy as it sounds either. So Prithwi, what about in customer success management? What's the impact of this rise of the digital world and everything being now digital and being stored as data? How is this impacting customer success, and how is it helping customer success?
Sure. Yeah. And, it's not very honestly different than, any other aspect of the business. It has equal amount of importance in, any other function within the organization. And since this conversation is around customer success, yes, absolutely. You see, the differentiation or the competitive advantage one wants to achieve by becoming more customer-centric starts off by understanding the customer even more, or as much as you can. Yes. All that means is you are trying to now get and store and analyze more and more information and data about the customer at a very foundational level. Then decide on, what makes sense to you and your business, and depending on which direction you are skewing, and then drive appropriately your business processes within the organization, triggered by that data and the underlying intelligence. Now, within customer success, a lot of moving parts. So, the variety of data is very high, and so is the velocity of data, right? So the quantum of data increasing day on day in a particular customer success function will be very, very high. The bigger challenges with the variety, because you have financial data, you have sentiment data, you have customer data, you have value related data, you have stakeholder related data, you have touch point related data, and so on and so forth. All your customer interactions, contractual needs, and stuff like that. Now, to a customer success team, at times it becomes a challenge, actually, whether too much of data is good or too much of data is bad. So you have to take that optimal path, what is right, depending on where you are in your organization. So the impact, Rick, in short, is very high, provided you have a clear line of sight on what you want to do with that data and how you want to approach sieving through this large ocean of data, if you will.
Okay. And I know you talk about something that you describe as the intelligence journey. So what do you mean by that expression, the intelligence journey? And just, sorry, apologies, just before you answer that question, I see there's someone just popped into chat saying that the video is not clear. Can I suggest, if you're having problems with the video, it's probably your end. It's all stable this end. I haven't had any other problems noted from other people. So my suggestion, just to come out and maybe refresh your browser and come back in and see if that helps you. And yes, we will indeed be sending out the recording to everybody. And by the way, Prithwi actually is joining us from Texas, which you may have heard, has had quite a lot of severe weather recently. So if there are any little sort of glitches and problems, our apologies in advance, but we're doing our best. So just to say that. So apologies to interrupting you there, Prithwi, but please do talk to us about the intelligence journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, as we started off this conversation, I personally believe the data revolution is actually behind us now, because everybody has access to that data. And like you correctly pointed out, the technology advancements and the affordability of technology around data has made it sort of universal. So that access to data is no longer a competitive advantage.
Okay.
What you do with it, though, is very much so. And that's what I think distinguishes, in our context of discussing this in the context of customer success, a good customer success to an average customer success to a world-class, best-of-breed customer success team, is how well and how appropriately do they utilize that data. So if you were to think about data as the foundational layer, you need the right insights and the right intelligence as a layer significantly above that, which really becomes the backbone of your customer success operations. And that is the customer intelligence journey, or the data to the intelligence journey I was mentioning to you earlier.
Now, this makes total sense to me. And the way I always used to describe this, because I used to do a lot of sort of slightly more technical training to sales specialists around and solution architects around how to develop business solutions based upon business outcome requirements. And one of the things I often used to say was, we started off in the information age, or in fact the data age, and we moved from data to information. So data is just like the bits and bytes stored. Information is the bits and bytes formatted. Okay, so you can read it. All right. But actually we've moved past the information age and we're now into the wisdom age.
Right.
And the idea of wisdom is it takes information and makes use of it in the context of what you're trying to achieve as a business. And that actually is the difficult bit. So what we've done so far, of course, I mean, as it's a journey, right? And the world of humanity is on that journey. And the world of humanity, as always, solves the easy problems first, which is how to get all the data together and store it and join it up. We've done that one. How to then format it in one format so we can look at it. Well, we've got there. But now what we need to do is how do we make best use of that through insightful thinking about that data. And this, of course, is where platforms such as SmartKarrot come in, I would say.
Yes, Rick, and there are one more dimension to this, which I think is helpful to discuss, because the moment the word intelligence comes in, a lot of marketing dollars has gone into the word artificial intelligence over the past, and there's an immediate correlation. So that is one aspect of intelligence. I just wanted to make it clear that that's one aspect.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a cover-all expression, because not everything that might be loosely described as artificial intelligence is what somebody who was an academic in artificial intelligence would consider to be anything like artificial intelligence. Correct. And you could anyway argue that artificial intelligence is not intelligence anyway. So, and I guess we could move into philosophy and from there into religion, and then we're back at square one, banging rocks together. But I would totally agree with you. So artificial intelligence is one route and a very valuable one.
Yes.
But it's not the only route into this. So how does this data enable CSMs to work better? What does it enable them to do? What can they do with this data?
Yeah, it's fundamental in nature. I mean, that is, the fuel. So again, I think the data is one part of it. So I think in my head, Rick, it's more the intelligence and the insights, like you mentioned, which are the true enablers for the CSMs and the CS community, and not necessarily, this ocean of data which they have access to.
Yeah.
So the variety is so much and the volume is so much. On an average, if you're handling, 100 odd customers or 50, anywhere between 50 to 100 customers, 5-6 stakeholders per account, it's a mind-boggling amount of just touch point data. And now you correlate it with financial data, the product usage data, matrix. It's not possible for, I think, a CSM to sieve through always. If it were only one account, you'd be in complete control and you'd know everything across all of these data points. At scale, it's not possible. So whilst the data is the enabler, I think true driver for the CSM is what insights you provide them with, and the right type of data at the right time, and then connect that with a lot of application of that data and insights into what actual actions they can take. Really, part of it can be automated, part of it still has to be manual, but that balancing and optimizing between the level of insights you are able to provide, leading into the interaction or the action, and then the feedback loop back into the data so that you can optimize it, is really what should be driving most best of breed customer success teams.
Okay, I love that. I love that word, insights. I think that's a great word to use here. If I was to say predictive analytics to you, would that kind of make sense as to what I'm thinking?
It is one aspect of it, Rick. So, the insight and the intelligence you create, one part of it can be predictive, that you're saying that, hey, this is what we think or we are forecasting as a likely scenario to happen, and you better watch out. There is an opportunity for you. So that's forecasting, and that's the predictive aspect. Even if you look at retrospective, right? Did you know this happened in your account? Did you know a key stakeholder? One of the most common things which we see is key stakeholders leaving. You're not aware of it until it's the last moment, and then your account goes into a spiral. So did you know? How do you know across the sea of data which is lying in front of you? So this is not predictive in nature, but it still has significant value. But what you say is true. It is a balance of, retrospective insight. It is a balance of what's happening and knowing stuff. And it's also an aspect of predicting what is likely to happen, where the truth will lie.
Where I see it, so I agree with what you've said, but where I see it is that there's a journey here where the machine is helping the human more and more, whereas let me, if I may, let me give the example of the automobile, the motor car.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you looked at a car that was built in the 50s or the 60s, it's going to have a speedo, and it's going to have a fuel gauge and an oil gauge and temperature, and that's about it in terms of like analytics. Okay, that's your lot. All right. Well, and you can listen to the sound of the engine, by the way, and make all sorts of additional noises there because you're a subject matter expert in your car, and it shouldn't be sounding like that. So there's that side of it. But in terms of what it's telling you, it's all historical data, because what it's doing is it's making a little check every now and then it's telling you what the last check said, even if that is only just a moment ago.
Yeah.
Such as a speedometer. Okay, arguably it's historical. Yeah. So, for example, like the fuel gauge. So last time I went and checked the fuel gauge, the fuel was 2/3 full. So that's what it's displaying. And then next time I'll check it, I'll update that fuel gauge. So we've got that going on. Now, if we move then to sort of 80s, 90s, and the Volkswagen Golf GTI and all of that sort of thing, you started to have like onboard computers, trip computers, and things, and now that is actually helping you because you could set in I've got to go from here to here, and it can start then giving you much more detailed information about, well, this is how long you've got, how many hours of driving or how many miles or kilometers of driving you've got until you need to refuel, which you could never do before. It could just tell you 2/3 full, but it couldn't tell you how useful that is to you, where you're going. And if you look now at a Tesla or any modern car that's got the latest gadgets on it, well, of course they're fitted to GPS and satellite, and they can not only tell you how far to go, but they can say, well, you've got 3 choices here, Mr. Adams, or Mr. Dasgupta. You can take route X, in which case I recommend you stop at this refueling station, which is the one before the last one, just to make sure. Or if you go route Y, then I would recommend making a stop at this one. And actually, that one is a better price.
Yeah. So example you pick up, the analogy, parallel analogy to customer success is, and we are discussing this with a lot of our customers and prospects, is the aspect of augmented intelligence, right? Because you're saying this is the human in your car example as well. I'm providing you with options, and with the you decide, right, at the end.
The human still decides, but the human decides in all 3 of those cars.
Correct.
It's just that in the modern car, they're given more help.
Correct.
It's still always the human that decides. However, even that, of course, Prithwi, as you and I know, if we then move to automated customer success, means that we can now say we are confident that the data that's coming in and the way in which it's analyzed is now good enough to say, I no longer need a human to sum check it and make the decision. I'm going to pass even the final decision making on, and I'm going to allow automated customer success to take over in those situations and push the email directly to the customer that says, we need this from you, or whatever the relevant thing is. So I see that actually as being the next step across, and the concept here, guys, is that it frees our most expensive resource. What's that? Our staff, to do other things, even more clever things that the technology still can't do. That's the game that we're playing.
If I may, sorry to interrupt you.
No,
balancing act, if I may, is so you have to look at what are repetitive tasks in customer success, or tasks which have less value. So sending out an email may not be the best, utilization of time if you have to send out hundreds and thousands of them, right? As an example. So there are similar tasks which are repetitive in nature. See, the aspect of customer success which we, sort of miss a lot of times is your main job is to show value to the customer.
Absolutely.
You have to, go back, and it's a tough job and a tough ask, and you need all the empowerment and you need all the help.
Yes.
And you don't need distraction from, administrative or mundane tasks. Now, those aspects of it, 100% should be automated, so that you, like you said, if you free up time to do the more value-adding work, which is really interacting with your customer, understanding their pain points, and showcasing value through your product.
Building the trust relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, having talked a little bit about the in the intelligence journey, then let's talk about the maturity of the customer success team, because I think one of the points that you've mentioned is that you feel that to an extent, it's not just data and the tool and the cleverness of the tool. It's also the maturity and the experience of the customer success team and their ability to handle this information. So what's the interaction between the maturity of the team and the maturity of the tool?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's a very important aspect of what we see today in the customer success ecosystem.
Okay.
Because as we are all aware, there are different functions and different skill sets which are sort of morphing into customer success. So you have a lot of skills and resources coming in from support, from sales, from pre-sales, from business analysis, from product management, So everyone coming with their own perspective, and like you are attempting with Practical CSM, and I love what you're doing, trying to sort of create that common layer of standardized learning around customer success.
Right.
Similarly, there is a standardized layer of data sets also, which is a bare minimum requirement. Obviously, you need to have renewal data, but do you need to slice dice renewal data 100 million ways?
Right.
Probably not at the outset. So I would recommend you start simple with the basic set, and then depending
You've
on
got
the
specialists maybe who can actually interpret and use that information maybe. Yeah.
So now the maturity is a very important aspect, because if you have, say, all significant analytical resources and coming from a data background and into customer success, which is a lot of and it's not going to happen because of that. You can give them a whole set of data and say, okay, now have fun with this. I know you'll be successful because you guys are analytical. You can correlate different data sets to each other and take the right decisions. That's not reality. Reality is you are throwing in teams right from leadership onwards into a very tough situation, and also throwing in a lot of data behind it, and then saying, now make a sense of all of this and just get us to significantly high retention numbers. So
and there's a number of things around that, I think, as well. Like, for example, the general rule in data is rubbish in equals rubbish out. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the fact that when you enter the data world and say, I want to be data driven, you expect value, but you can morph data into different ways. So it will be garbage in, garbage out. So which is why I have personally stopped talking about data within my organization. We talk mostly around insights and intelligence. What are you doing with that data? If it is, we need to show value to our customers as well. How do you track that, right? So there will be different data points. There will be different insights and intelligence just around this basic tenet. And that tenet needs to get measured and driven. So similarly, connecting it back to your question of the maturity of CS teams, no team will approach it in the same way. And I think that's the wrong approach, just trying to retrofit what worked elsewhere, or what your vendor is trying to tell you, this is my data model, work only with this. I don't think that's the right way. You have to figure out, depending on your team composition and structure and maturity, what is the right level of complexity of data and insight you are providing your team, giving them the best chance to be successful in doing what is a fairly tough ask overall in your organization.
Thank you. And I'd like to pick up on a couple of things, if I may, there. Absolutely. That I think are very interesting. So I think the first thing I want to say is I see a customer success platform as being departmentally similar in nature to something like an executive decision-making tool like SAP or Oracle. And similarly, if you go and look in the SAP archives, you will find SAP implementations that cost $10 million to implement, but returned $100 million within a few years. And you'll also find SAP implementations that cost $100 million to implement and returned only 10 million. Okay, so I'm not making that up. So the point here is you've got to pick the right tool for the job, and it may well have been that SAP, which is an incredibly detailed tool, may have been like a sledgehammer to crack a nut, perhaps for an organization. It may just have been the wrong tool for them, or the wrong tool at the wrong time. And I think this is the important thing. So the concept here, I believe, is when it comes to the maturity of the customer success team, aside from our ability to understand and use the tool, which is one thing, I also want to say this, is that in the first few years, we are learning in customer success what customer success looks like and is in our organization, and how best to serve our customers. You cannot automate what you don't already know and have defined as a process, because the computer can't change its mind. That's our job. So we've got to tell it what to do. We can't tell it what to do if we ourselves don't know what to do. And that takes maturity. So the first thing we need to do before we get systems and processes all nailed down in a very expensive customer success platform and start and start like trying to feed this and like bowing to this big, software system. That's the wrong way around. We don't want the software system to lead us. We've got to lead it. We've got to tell it what we need out of it, and we need to set it up so that we get that out of it. Any thoughts on what I don't know if I'm expressing very well.
You're right. Only thing to add there, Rick, is you can utilize the system to also get to your optimal, process.
Yeah.
You need to measure, like you said, you have to start somewhere and then start measuring your own team and your own process. There is also data there, and who's capturing the data and who's analyzing that data and saying, hey, your process is working or is it not working? And here you can optimize it over time, and then keep measuring and keep optimizing. And things change. Right. What you set as a process today, like the pandemic, for instance, would have completely changed a lot of customer success operations overnight. So are you flexible enough to implement a new process now and learn, capture data?
Are we ready for this? Yeah, are we ready for this? Both in terms of training of the users and their understanding and their ability to apply it in the real world. And I think it's far better to master, 3 insights in your language than it is to try to give our CSM 25 insights and expect them to do something useful out of it.
Yes.
Okay, so bit by bit, turn another feature on next month. Don't try and switch everything on at once, and start with the data that you've got before. So if you are now in a situation, and maybe there are some out there who are in a situation where they've grown to the stage where up until now they have not yet invested in a dedicated customer success platform. That doesn't mean they don't have any data. Far from it. Of course, they've got data in their CRM tool, data in their HR tools, data in their finance, data from the product team, data from the sales team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, no doubt, the CSMs have got Excel spreadsheets up the yin yang if they haven't got if they're anything like me, and that all needs to come together. It's going to take time and effort, but you can't. And again, from a productivity perspective, I would suggest rather than drop everything and spend the next 3 months wading through every aspect of that data, pick the handful of things that are going to be the low-hanging fruit in terms of what's going to really make the difference. What are the 5 key insights that if we knew them, that would help us.
Yeah.
And then do those and get them right, and then pick 2 more and add them. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you said it. The only other dimension to this I'll provide is in terms of managing data and insights and intelligence, technology will always be there. I don't think that is the problem, because, whether it's, 10 data sets or whether it's 1,000 data sets or it's 1,000,000 data set, the technology is there.
Yeah, but you've got to set it up. You've got to pay for it. You've got to purchase the software. You've got to implement the software. You've got to train people. You've got to set it up. You've got to get the different systems talking to each other. So every increase in one more data set actually is a cost. Whether you define it in time or money or whatever.
Yes, but more than that, Rick, I think that is still a cost organizations would be fine handling, because it's not much, honestly, today's date and world. But the issue is with every new data set, you are increasing the challenge quotient of your team. And now what I recommend is, because the technology is there, the platform can support as complex data sets and whatever you want to do. But whether your team can or not is the question we need to ask ourselves. And then, time it well and optimize it well over time. So you can get from simple to complex fairly easy. Getting from complex to simple is always much more difficult.
Yeah, I guess so. And I would also say that, I have come across real life situations where effectively what's happened is they've implemented far too complex a system, and the CSMs are now spending like the vast majority of their times inputting data into the system instead of talking to the customer and doing their job. And it's effectively placed like considerable overhead on the CSM that is far more than the value that they're getting out of the tool.
Exactly.
And that, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So where does customer success data come from? How's it collected? How's it stored? How's it analyzed? Tell me the practical facts here.
Yeah, I think most of it is common knowledge. If you ask me, Rick, you mentioned all the systems there. Now, the nuance which we are seeing is, whilst you say financial data can come from the financial system, the financial data can come from multiple different systems also, including the financial system. So within the financial system, you may have invoice data separate, contract data separate, some aspects of financials being tracked in the CRM itself, and we have seen all of these flavors in our experience over the last couple of years. Similar with operational data, similar with key contact or stakeholder data, who matters. You might want your emails to be tracked. You want how many times have I spoken to this gentleman? Do I have my voice recordings available? So there are there is no dearth of data initiation, like we discussed in the beginning of the session, that anything and everything we touch today creates data, and probably potentially relevant data to serve our customers. Now, so the standard, support systems, financial systems, CRM systems, sentiment systems, experience systems are all sources of potential data for customer success, and even more. Again, I think technology has evolved where getting access to that data and integrating that data into a common data warehouse or a pool is no longer a big deal. It can get done fairly easily. The challenge is in what, again, I go back to what we were talking about earlier, that what do you do now? You have this whole set of data warehouse created. Now, how do you glean that insight and that intelligence out of it? So that's where I think the next competitive differentiation is likely to be in the customer success space. Again, for vendors like ourselves, absolutely. Even for organizations as they drive their CS processes, what do you do? Can you keep it simple? We have seen history in business has taught us that the best businesses are run the most in the most simple manner.
Okay. Yeah.
If you complicate it, it's very difficult to execute. So you can't scale. So good products are simple in nature. Yeah. Good businesses are simple in nature. So should how you manage data be. Keep it simple, get to the right intelligence, do the right actions. And that's sort of the structure. Get the data, all these sources are there. That's not different at all. Everyone will have access to the same potentially type of data.
Right. Okay. Cool. Just to let you know, we've just got a little bit of glitching on you there, but I think you're back now, so that's fine. And I think we got the gist of what you were saying. So that's cool. If it happens again, what I might ask you to do is turn your video off so that we
have
the bandwidth for the audio. But at the moment, we're back to it being absolutely fine. So okay. So leads me to think about the concept of ownership of the data and access to the data. So in an ideal world, and you've said yourself, and I forgive me, I've used data again, and you've already said that you prefer to think about this as insights, and that's cool, and I totally get where you're coming from on that. So I don't mind you asking it from the perspective either of data or of insight. But what I'm trying to say is, who gets access to the system, who gets to see this stuff and use it, and who should it be shared with, both inside and outside of the company?
Yeah, again, there is no one size fits all there, Rick. I think it completely and wholly solely depends on your type of business, how you have structured your internal team. So for example, a lot of customer success teams have specialized, let's say, onboarding resources. They have specialized, say, ongoing customer technical resources, and so on and so forth. So by virtue of doing that, you have now created obvious channels of what relevant data to channelize to whom and what not to send. And then there is the other side of the story, wherein you have an organization wherein the CSM really front ends all of this together and sort of orchestrates that for the different roles across the rest of the organization, in which case they need access to this entire gamut of data. Right. So, and the same goes for the customer. And I think you and I discussed once earlier, why would the customer and to what extent would the customer share data? And what does it mean for them? And I think what my experience has been at SmartKarrot and prior as well, that customers are very keen to share, provided they see the value coming back to them.
And they trust you with it, right? So they've got to trust you in the first place.
Those are hygiene. That is hygiene. So that is not compromisable at all. But
Yeah.
after the hygiene is met and they give you data, if it is data so that you can run marketing campaigns and your outreach for your goals,
Yeah.
that's not going to work. But if it helps them, you come back to them and say, hey, with this data, we are optimizing your process so that your business metric is improved in this way. And this is what it means for you. Then absolutely, I don't see a challenge, and I've never faced a challenge of customers sharing data if you take that latter route.
That's a really powerful statement, because to me, what that said is that this is, again, as things stand, not all customer success organizations, not all companies are doing this, right?
Yes.
So if you want to be ahead of the curve, if you want to have a USP, a unique selling point, if you want to be able to say, like, why come to us instead of our competitors? This is part of that juicy, this is what we do that our competitors don't do, is we don't just make assumptions based upon historically what we've done with other companies. We go and actually use your data. And what we build for you is based upon insights around your real data that actually is in your organization, not what we think might be in your organization, or not what the average is in your industry. It's actually what is. Right. And is that not what partnering is all about? And is that not what we're trying to achieve? Is that not what the salesperson is like going around promising to the customers? We're not a supplier, we're your partner. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, but like again, we all know a lot of companies talk about it, and it's a tough thing to do. A few of them are able to actually achieve that partnership, and a lot of it is also to do with intent. So, if you approach it, again, the technology is there, the data is there. In this case, even the insights may be there, but you're saying, hey, this is a playbook in SmartKarrot, and this task asks me to ask my customer about and do a success planning exercise with them. Yeah, so the technology is there. It will guide you. It will give you a nudge saying, hey, your success planning session is due with your customer. That's fine. But what do you do in that success planning session, right? That is intent. So you can't say, I'll just do it so that I tick mark a task off of in my customer.
Right. No, I agree with you. I think that is very important.
But if you have intent, you can partner. Absolutely.
A couple of points just to finish off on. What is the difference between business intelligence and customer intelligence?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to address this. I think firstly, Rick, it's a philosophical difference. The moment you say business intelligence it has been rather mostly used for internal benefits and internal requirements. How is my business doing? If I am doing a sentiment analysis, I'm changing this around. How is my sales impacted? If my NPS goes to a certain score, what is my correlation with my shareholder value? Those are all drivers we have seen in the last decade or so. Business intelligence, it's inward facing. Customer intelligence just flips it around. You're saying now the customer is in the center. All intelligence nuggets are around the customer. It's not around your business, and it's a big change, because how you structure your data, even how you structure your reporting and your dashboards are very different in a customer intelligence context, and how you structure your teams, right? So that's that journey we are seeing, that from business intelligence has its value. We all do it. We have to do it for running our own businesses. But when you talk of customer intelligence, it is all of these data and intelligence and nuggets for customer value.
Well, you see, I think that's a really important point, because let me ask you this then. How should our customer success platform be arranged? Should it be aligned or oriented around the axis of customer in the center, or around the axis of our own business in the center?
Yeah, so the practical answer, Rick, it has to address both the needs.
Right.
And you mentioned it earlier that there are different, personas, and when we look at our own platform, there are different personas who interact with it. There is the executive level interactions, there is a head of CS interaction, there is a CSM interaction. Different roles have different needs, which is why a customer success tool is also not an easy platform to build, because of the diversity of data requirements and the diversity of insights required by different people. So the CFO or the CEO would expect business intelligence along with customer intelligence out of a platform. The customer success manager largely requires customer intelligence because that's what drives their goals and KPIs.
Because that's what the customer needs, and the CSM is there to guide the customer.
Yeah, so it's a balancing act. I think the best structuring is just to do a proper.
So in effect, we need both views. We need to be able to take the same data and spin everything around.
Yes.
And have it to be oriented towards business intelligence when we need to discuss how we are doing, and oriented towards customer intelligence when we're discussing and thinking about how they are doing, which is more what the day-to-day duties of the CSM should be around. Exactly. And I'm going to ask you maybe a contentious question here, and maybe I'm being a bit unfair, but do you think that the average customer success platform as is out there currently does that job?
No. I think, again, like most things evolving, we have had a great last 10 years with early adopters of tools and platforms, and organizations like Gainsight, etc., have done phenomenally well and done a great job of evangelizing the concept of customer success. I think the next generation of tools, hopefully SmartKarrot included, will do better justice to what do you now take it to the next level of,
which is the customer orientation, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So I think that's a great point to end it on, where we're talking a little bit about the future and the next generation coming in, and the fact that we need both of these orientations rather than focusing perhaps too much on ourselves, which I believe perhaps is the case as well. I would suggest in the tools that we've the more traditional tools, and that we're seeing vendors obviously react to that now and are coming out with these new ideas I think are really cool. I love the idea, by the way, of sharing the same data with the customer and the same views as much as is practical, possible, and correct to do so. I love this, again, because it comes back to this business partnering. But I want to throw things open for questions just for the last few minutes. We've got about 7, I think, minutes before the end of the session. So does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Prithwi around the topic of our conversation, which is the role of data in customer success management, or indeed ask him anything else? He does do a general agony aunt column. So if you have any personal problems you wish to air on, feel free to ask those as well. But it would be good if we had any questions relating particularly to data in customer success. If you've got any of those, that would be cool. And whilst you're thinking about that, please do type them in the chat window. A couple came in earlier, private messages coming in earlier from Kareem. What is meant by the term digital business? What is the difference between a digital business and any other business?
Yeah, it's a good question. It can mean quite a few things. I think most commonly what it means is a business where a large part of addressing the need of the customer they sell to is handled digitally. So, a large part of the service they provide is digital in nature. So very little interaction with humans in this experience of interacting with that organization. So that's largely a very basic definition of a digital business. However, now there are nuances to this. You may also have a business who has a very human touch approach to it, but a large part of their internal organization is run digitally.
Right.
Because they have achieved a high level of digital transformation. So some organizations also call themselves a digital business there. So you could have a little bit of both. My personal preference is businesses where the services are provided digitally, are sold digitally, are more likely to earn that definition of being called a digital business.
But it's a sliding scale, really, isn't it? There isn't like a cutoff point where you can say, right, that one, that's a digital business. That one, that's not a digital business. And that could be done in terms of across the board. We're raising that level bit by bit within different functions and organizations, or it could be we're actually digitalizing functions, but not those ones yet. And they're still on a more manual documented by handwriting sort of way. But effectively, it's the way in which the data is collected, the way in which the data is stored, the way in which the data is analyzed, and then the way in which decisions are made. I would say would cover that. And if we break it down, would that make sense?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Another question. You mentioned earlier, so this is from Leslie. You mentioned earlier that the amount of data that can be coped with might depend upon the maturity or experience of the team. So how much is too much, and how do you know?
Yeah, Leslie, there's that really is the $1 million question.
Yeah.
How do you know? So you only know, like most things, after you attempt it and you optimize it over time. And there are different ways you can get to knowing it. My recommendation always has been for most things to start off in bite-sized pieces and small.
Right.
Do what is bare minimum, the lowest common multiple. If that's working for you, that's great. If it is not, and you find ways you can optimize more by adding on more data components, and you feel the team is mature enough to handle it now, so add on that extra level of complexity with the additional data sets, and so on and so forth. Over time, you can make it more and more complex, so that there is no knowing how to swim till the time you jump. I think you'll have to start somewhere.
So that's like evolution, not revolution.
Yes.
Do it bit by bit and ask for feedback.
Yes.
Get feedback. Is this okay? Is it working? Is this making your life easier or harder? Are we getting benefits from it? Are we getting value from it? Shall we try a little bit more?
Yeah.
And here's the 375 function new thing.
Absolutely.
Do it all.
And we see this a lot. We have seen this a lot, and we have gone back and explain to our customers as well. For example, product usage data. You can get millions of data points just by depending on how complex your system is. Are all those data points required? Probably not. Now, if you have a set of golden feature sets, or start there, do 10 data sets around usage and see if that correlates with your results and objectives. If yes, good enough. If not, either change them around or add more to it, but do it incrementally. Because if you throw suddenly a whole ton of usage data, the reports will come, but you may not necessarily get the best benefit of that.
Well, and also, the rule of troubleshooting is make one change at a time. And the reason for that is because if you make multiple changes at the time, you don't know which one of those changes actually made the difference. And that's the same thing with a new system as well. When you implement a new system, maybe you've put 50 new functions in and you've seen an improvement. Well, did it come from all 50, or did it come from one of them, or did it come from 5 of them? Which 5? You'll never know. It's going to be far harder than if you implement them incrementally, one by one, and then you can test each one. Maybe not each one, but at least not all 50 in one go. So okay, I think we'll leave it there. This has been, I think, a really good conversation. It's maybe a little bit dry, a little bit heavy, but I think it's a really important one for CS leaders particularly, but anyone, I think, in customer success, certainly who is responsible for decision making, to get to grips with. And as a razor sharp mind in this, and somebody who's been involved in data systems for as long as you've been, I think your insight is really, really valuable. So I do want to say, and especially because it was short notice, thank you very, very much, Prithwi, for sharing your thoughts with us over the last hour. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure, Rick. Yeah, thanks for having me again. Yeah.
No, my pleasure too. Thank you. And just to let everyone know again, this is part of a series, and I'm just going to quickly share my screen to remind you this is Coffee Bar Conversations live. And as it says there, this is a series of intimate discussions about the customer success profession featuring the world's leading CS thought leaders. We have a different thought leader each month. Excuse me, looking around to my right whilst I play about with my second screen. You can see here our guests coming up. So we had my own COO kicked us off in January. There's Prithwi in February. Next month in March, we've got Dario Cavallaro, who is the EMEA Manager, Security Customer Success Specialists for Cisco. And of course, we're talking about customer success in the security industry. So if that appeals, please do register. But there's plenty more coming up as well. as you can see here. To get to that page, very straightforward. Just come up, go to practicalcsm.com and go to free live webinars, coffee bar conversations. So on that note, I think that is it. We are done. So again, thank you very much, Prithwi, and thank you also to everybody who stayed on to the end and listened all the way through. Really good to have you here, and look forward to seeing you again in another episode. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.